Hi, Sally Walker here, your hormone and slow age expert. So what increases blood glucose? That is such an important question, isn't it? So let's talk about that, because knowing what increases blood glucose will help you make the changes so you can keep your blood glucose under control. Okay, so top of the list here is food. And it's any food that's going to end as glucose. So which foods are they? Well, they're carbohydrates. So it's all carbohydrate. Do not let yourself be fooled by the food industry. All carbohydrates, if it's a starch, if it's a sugar, if it's whole grain, or if it's not, if it's processed, etc. Anything and everything which is a carbohydrate will eventually end as glucose, and it will end in your liver. And then your liver will make decisions as to what it's going to do with it. Might send it out in the blood, might have to store it itself, might store it as glycogen, might convert it to fat. So anything and everything which is carbohydrate or sugar, whatever you want to call it, so starches, sugars, they're all carbohydrates, will end as glucose. So be very, very conscious of how much carbohydrate you are eating. So what else will increase? Well, one of the most important functions of the hormone cortisol is to maintain and lift blood glucose levels 24 hours a day. There is a production of cortisol all through the day to maintain your blood glucose levels. So back in the day, and I'm not talking about granny, I'm talking about before there, we didn't always get food. So back in the day when food was more scarce and we didn't get food, or we didn't get enough food every single day, we need to maintain our blood glucose in other ways, because blood glucose is important for in particular for two tissue types in the body. The one of them is the brain and the other one is the red blood cells, because they cannot use fat to make energy. So they can't use fat as fuel. So the red blood cells don't have any mitochondria. Their job is to carry oxygen and to carry carbon dioxide to and from tissues, all your cells, so we can make energy and get rid of the carbon dioxide. So putting mitochondria, as they're called, which is where we would use fat to make energy, takes up a lot of room. And we need the room to carry the oxygen. So red blood cells don't have mitochondria. So simply they can only burn glucose to make energy, or not burn it. They're going to make it without oxygen. And then your brain. Now your brain has mitochondria, but for some reason they cannot burn fat. I don't know who designed this. But it's clearly a fault, isn't it? Because we would love our brains to be able to burn fat. It can burn ketones and glucose, that's it. So to make sure your brain's working, so you can think about where you can find some food, to make sure your red blood cells are working, so you've got oxygen going to all the cells, so they can make energy from fats that you might have in your diet, or fats that you have stored, then we need to be able to maintain blood glucose levels. And cortisol is the hormone which does this. Makes cortisol pretty much the most important hormone of our body, but we need to think about how we can control this, because the more cortisol you are producing, the more blood glucose you will be making. And it makes it by breaking down protein, so your skin, your bones, your muscle tissue, and its favourite protein to break down is actually collagen. So if you think your skin is getting a bit weak and a bit wrinkled, etc., it might be because you're too stressed. Might be because you need some estrogen if you're a lady. But anyway, that's what cortisol does. It breaks down collagen to make sure that there is blood glucose. So it releases the amino acids, which it then converts into glucose. Very fancy word, gluconeogenesis. Anyway, but it's making blood glucose. Because that's what it's supposed to do. And it has a 24-hour cycle, whereas it is the highest in the morning when you wake, because you've been fasting, your blood glucose is probably a little bit low at that point, so that's where it's highest. And then from about maybe 10 o'clock in the morning, it then drops, and it will be lower and very lower during the evening time. So the rest of the day it'll be lower, and then during the evening it'll be lower again, because you're not supposed to be making or needing a lot of energy in the evening time. Okay, so we always talk about the word stress with cortisol. So it's really more how much energy you need to fix whatever is stressing you physically, mentally, emotionally, and that will affect cortisol. Inflammation will also affect cortisol levels because cortisol is also the biggest anti-inflammatory hormone we have. So it will decrease, it will actually prevent you from making inflammation. And it's also an immune suppressant. So inflammation is part of the immune system. We don't want it going crazy and we don't want the immune system attacking our own cells, etc. So cortisol is going to keep that in check. And that's also what it does first thing in the morning where we have this increase of cortisol. Not only does it get the blood glucose higher, but it also checks out your immune system and decreases inflammation, etc., etc. So it is very important. Cortisol is very important. But related to blood glucose, we do not want too much of it because then we're going to have high blood glucose and then we're going to have that cascade with high insulin resistance and things like that, okay? So foods and cortisol. Lack of sleep is a biggie. High intensity exercise, we know this will increase your blood glucose as well, especially of a shorter duration. Now, that is not necessarily a bad thing, yeah? When you start doing any kind of exercise, your muscles are going to be really wanting to get all the glucose they can, so it makes sense. So don't worry about that one so much, yeah? Ladies, the second half of your menstrual cycle, we have an increase in our energy production, our metabolism increases because you're getting ready now. Maybe you got a fertilized egg and you're going to be pregnant for the next 9 months. So we do actually also have a little bit of a higher blood sugar at that point of time as well. Yeah, and then there are certain medications, the contraceptive pill being one of them, antidepressants, steroids. So having hydrocortisone is the cortisol is going to affect your blood glucose levels as well. Yeah, and then it could be because you're deficient in insulin, so that is type 1 diabetes, or you're insulin resistant and you have type 2 diabetes. So you're going to have high blood sugars because of challenges with insulin. Anyway, check out that article because it's very important. As I said, if you know why your blood glucose is high, then you know how you can fix it. Knowledge is power, people. Happy hormones, happy life.